part of the Earglue Media family of podcasts.
You're listening to Petticoats and Poppies.
History Girls at the Movies.
Welcome to Petticoats and Poppies, History Girls at the Movies. We're your hosts, Maggie and
Nicole. If you guys enjoyed our episode on the Great Wall, then you are in for a treat today because we have another episode of a movie that we don't like. We're about to pick apart The Greatest Showman.
Or the not-so-great Showman.
Maggie and I are both big fans of musicals, so we thought that we would do a theme this month about movie musicals. And the thing about movie musicals, I think, if you're a fan of musical theater, is that they can either be really good or really bad. And to start with, we've got one that neither of us exactly love.
At all. But before we get into the episode, we did want to talk about what we are currently watching, which is shockingly similar.
Yes. So we've both been watching Bridgerton, as has like the rest of the world.
The entire world, and TikTok has already created a musical for it. So.
It has. Also, I've got to say, like, my Bridgerton TikTok content every time pops off. So, like, if you're looking to get views, that's how. I love Bridgerton. I watched, like, the whole thing, like, in the first 3 days that it was up.
Same.
Because I've been writing about it for Culturess. And I'm obsessed. I'm so obsessed. I love Johnny Bailey. Johnny was in a show at the Donmar Warehouse whenever I worked there, and he is an angel of a human. And then I also saw him in Company in the West End. And so getting to see him play Anthony on Bridgerton has been so exciting.
Anthony so much.
I love Anthony. He is my second favorite Bridgerton brother. I'm so sorry, Johnny. I'm a Benedict girl all the way.
Oh.
Yeah, I love Ben. I mean, but of course I love Benedict. He's like an artsy bohemian type.
He is.
But I love Bridgerton so much. Like, I actually think I'm about to start rewatching it, and I never rewatch anything
Television.
other than like Reign and Downton Abbey. So, you know, it's a big deal for something to get added to my rewatch list.
I'm so impressed. And then we both also just watched The Dig, and we both wrote reviews for it.
Yes, yeah. So it was actually my second time watching it because I love The Dig. Like, it's one of those films, and I'm sure you know this, where like you watch it and you're kind of like, well, this isn't a great movie. Like, I don't think everyone will like The Dig. It's very slow, and some people are going to be turned off by that. It almost feels like, even though I know that a lot of stuff happens, it kind of feels like nothing happens in the movie. But also, if you have Carey Mulligan, Lily James, and Johnny Flynn in the same film, I don't need anything to happen. Like, if you just want to let me look at them in period clothing, that's fine. It's already a comfort film for me, I think.
I cannot wait until we get to talk about that movie in an episode, because I got like really cerebral with it and was like thinking like really in depth into some of the like reasons like behind some of like the choices that were made in the film, that at first I was like, oh, I don't like this, and then I was like, wait, that actually works if you like dig into it. So I'm like really excited to go like full galaxy brain in like a couple months.
Definitely. I think, you know, it's the kind of film that like it definitely has its audience, which is like us. People who listen to this podcast probably. And I think that if you are in that audience, you'll really like it. Like, my mom really liked it too.
My mom loved it. She's a huge Sutton Who like aficionado. That was like the first thing she dragged me to see at the British Museum. Actually, I take that back. The Elgin Marbles were the first thing she made me go look at the British Museum. And then it was Sutton Who. So she was really excited, and she loves Johnny Flynn. So it was such a great movie to watch with my mom.
If you like Johnny Flynn at all, man, this is a great movie for you.
Also, I like Ralph Fiennes, so like I enjoyed it, and my mom just kept kind of like giving me this look like, why do you like him for? I'm like, he's not my favorite Fine brother, but he is one of my favorite Fine brothers.
I like him. Like, I feel like I've never seen a movie that I disliked him in. Like, I feel like he is such a consistent actor, and I really like seeing him in period pieces, and I feel like we don't always
and he
get
also
enough
had
of
to
that
say
from him.
Snape in this, and it just cracked me up.
In terms of other Netflix movies, actually, I also recently watched Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which like, even if you're not interested in Ma Rainey, who is a fascinating historical figure,
Mhm.
you should definitely watch it just because it is Chadwick Boseman's last performance. And I
Yes.
think
And
that's
a
very
bunch of
special.
my friends worked on that movie.
Amazing. It's such a well-made movie. It's, I mean, production design, costume design, just gorgeous. Viola Davis is so great in it, as is Chadwick Boseman. The whole supporting cast is fantastic too. And I think it brings up a lot of really interesting conversations about art and about race, and especially in that time period. And, you know, I
Mhm.
highly recommend it. And I also think it's probably gonna be a big player at the Oscars, especially in the acting races. So I think it's always fun whenever the Oscars do finally roll around, if you've already seen some of those movies. So if anyone's
Mhm.
listening and like looking for stuff to watch, it's on Netflix. So I definitely recommend that one.
Oh, yes. And then I've been rewatching Heartland, which is not a historical film. It's a TV series set in Canada. It was like originally a book series when I was a kid. It's a horse book series, and it was actually set here in Virginia. And then Canada turned it into a TV series like 17 seasons ago or something ridiculous. And it's set in Canada now, but I've been rewatching it because I am working on a film script that is set on a ranch. So I felt like I needed to get in touch with my inner horse girl, and I'm having a blast, and that's on Netflix, and it's great. And if you watch Canadian television shows, you'll recognize like a dozen people. It's hilarious.
What is it streaming on? Is it
It's on
something?
Netflix.
Okay, I need to tell my sister.
Your sister would love it. She would also
yeah.
love the book series. The book series, in my opinion, is better than the TV series just because I grew up on it and like asked for Christmas. Like I would ask for Christmas gifts that were based off the clothing that the character Amy wore in the covers of the book, because they had like a real like person sit for the covers. And so I
I
like
love
always
that.
wanted to be her, and I had like this cable knit white sweater, and like it was a whole thing. So I have a lot of like weird attachment to the books, and so every time something happens in the TV series that like definitely did not happen in my book series, I'm like, that's not right. These are not the right characters. But it's really great, and if you like are a horse girl, which I am and your sister is, it's like the absolute perfect, because there's romance, there's drama, there's lots of horses, there's like a horse story of the week basically, and it
I love
teaches a
that.
lot of stuff about like natural remedies and like getting like in tune and in touch with horses, which was something I was really into as a kid. And it's just great. The book series touched on it a little bit more than like the TV series, but it's fantastic. And that is my rant for the day. Sorry for info dumping.
No, I love it. I love it. Well, today we're going to talk about The Greatest Showman, which came out in 2017. It's a movie musical directed by Michael Gracie. It actually was his directorial debut.
Wow.
So maybe that makes me feel a little bit nicer towards it. I don't know.
Huh.
It was written by Ginny Bix and Bill Condon, and it starred like big letters, Hugh Jackman. And
every
then
movie with Hugh Jackman stars Hugh Jackman.
Stars Hugh Jackman. Michelle Williams, Zac Efron, Rebecca Ferguson, and most importantly, Zendaya.
Love her.
There were 9 original songs from Binge Pasek and Justin Paul. And it's about P.T. Barnum, like creating Barnum's American Museum, kind of. It claims to be. And it's actually, I discovered, the 5th highest grossing live action movie
I hate it so much. Why?
This is The Bad Place.
This is The Bad Place. Get better taste, people.
So, had you seen it before?
No, I don't like P.T. Barnum, and so I remember when this movie was coming out, and I was like, why is everyone losing their minds over P.T. Barnum?
Right.
He's like such a terrible person. And I love Hugh Jackman, but I'm sorry, like, there's no way, unless I'm being forced for a podcast, that I was going to watch this.
I thought this podcast was such a great idea because I was like, yeah, we can have another episode like The Great Wall where like people seem to like it whenever we just like roast a movie. And then I realized that meant that we had to watch the movie.
Nicole, I just realized something. Our 2 roast podcasts are The Great Wall and The Greatest Showman.
Yep. Although to be fair, we kind of roasted Vita in Virginia too.
This is true. That is a roast episode. Oh my God. So last night we both watched this. I thought it was a really great idea to just like write my exact thoughts as they were happening. And so I would like to share those with the audience and our lovely listeners of exactly what was going through my mind.
I was actually only a little bit ahead of you in the film, and I could tell because I was actually watching you write your notes.
Well, I did stop it at one time, and I just kind of like laid back in bed and stared at the ceiling and wondered, will Nicole know if I just stop and then like lie my way through the episode? But I soldiered through.
Thank you.
So my first thought was the loaf of bread, which just cracked me up because I was like, he stole a loaf of bread. And then I was like, why is this music so bad? And why are people dancing on rooftops? And then I was just like, P.T. Barnum is a dick. Why are we trying to make him seem like a good guy? Also, his top hat was too small and like a number of scenes, which like really irked me. And if you want to know how I like hyper focus on things that really annoy me to like avoid paying attention to like the larger things that annoy me, like this movie's existence, I hyper fixated on the fact that Hugh Jackman had this big gold wedding band on, and it was supposed to be 1850, and they did not wear wedding bands like that in 1850. I was just like, and then he was drinking like the entire movie, and this man was a member of the temperance movement. Why is he drank in like every other scene. And look, the only circus freaks that I care about are the ones that belong on Coney Island. I am bored of what I was watching last night, and it's already over. Also, I don't know about you, but there was some really weird tension in that bar scene between Hugh and Zach, and I was like, are you seducing him? What is happening here?
It's like that TikTok noise that's like, I am uncomfortable with the energy that we have created.
And Zach looked uncomfortable with the energy.
I forgot that TikTok sound that people have been using lately is from that song.
Wait, what?
Yeah, there's a verse of that song. It's Zach's like main verse that people have been using a bunch on TikTok. I'll send you one later.
Oh my god!
Anyone listening who has a TikTok may know what I mean. But people have been using a verse of it lately.
Yes.
Yep. You know, I was like waiting for it to click the like, thanks, but no. Okay, I'm good to go. Like, and so I had literally forgotten that was from The Greatest Show.
Oh my god!
So he sung that, and I like died laughing. Yeah, that scene is uncomfortable.
Also, I may or may not have started like mentally singing the song from Love Never Dies when Raoul and the Phantom are in the bar. And I was just like, why? But honestly, like Hugh was putting off some weird energy, and I was like, are y'all gonna like kiss? Like, what exactly are you getting at here? Because you're vibing. And Zach looked horrified, which was like the best thing. Also, like the poor barkeep, this man is dancing on his bar top. And then they dance on it again later in the movie. And I'm like, guys, come on, stop. Also, I personally thought that the pitchforks and like torches was a little heavy-handed.
It felt like, oh, is this Beauty and the Beast?
It's like, oh, now we've got him as Gaston. Also, like, there was multiple editing errors in this movie. I noticed like 4. And I don't think they were glaring, like, maybe it's because I was, like, hyper-fixating on this movie being annoying. But there's a couple, and one is actually when Jenny is singing. And they cut between her, like, while she's, like, in the middle of singing a note, and, like, it's very clear that it's, like, 2 different takes, and, like, not even the same, possibly, like, the same moment, because, like, her hair is a little bit different. I don't know, it was weird. And, like, her mouth is moving in a different way. It was just weird. It, like, really threw me off. I also was not impressed with like the whole Jenny Lynn thing. I didn't like her dress, and I'll talk about that later.
Yep, we're going to get into the whole Jenny Lynn thing
I'm
later.
so excited for what you're going to talk about. I also thought like, to be slightly nice here, I felt like this whole mess of a movie would have been much better suited for the stage. And I felt like a lot of the stuff, like the CGI horse and some of the weird CGI choices, it didn't work. Also, it might be better as a TikTok musical. Like that maybe is just my opinion. There's just so many things, and I think that they got really lost with where they were going. Because I really enjoyed what they were doing with Zendaya and Zach's characters, and like Rewrite the Stars is the only song that I knew from this, aside from the ones that Ramin covered.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, I love this relationship. Can we stop, like, just drop P.T. Barnum and just give me this Carlisle Anne's story because it's like actually compelling. But instead they just like wasted it and just had her sitting on the bedside after he like caught on fire. Also, what was Carlisle supposed to be? Like why was it not like later on and like Bailey? And I don't know. It was just some choices were made and they weren't good.
Yep. That sums up the whole film.
I'm so sorry.
That's, before anything else that I'm going to say, I want to say, like, I know that some people really enjoy this movie.
I know, and I feel bad being like,
Well, hey, if you enjoy this movie, like, good for you. Good for you, and I mean that sincerely.
Yeah, I do too. Like, I'm glad that you can find joy in this because I did not.
This movie is my worst nightmare. It's about P.T. Barnum, who I hate, and we'll get into that later. It has music by Pasek and Paul, who are some of my least favorite working composers. It's a movie musical, which I am notoriously picky about. And I haven't liked Hugh Jackman in a musical since he did Oklahoma. I think Hugh Jackman tends to make musicals the Hugh Jackman show instead of whatever musical it's meant to be. And like, we get it, dude. You want to play Harold Hill. The right way to do that is not to pretend that P.T. Barnum is Harold Hill. So there are some things I like in this film. Zendaya is in this film. I like that.
Her.
Will Swenson plays his dad in those scenes in the beginning, which I enjoy. I will say, like, the very peppy song "A Million Dreams" with like the scene of his dad dying happening, that
So
and him
weird.
like stealing food. I was like, this is the funniest shit they did not mean for it to be.
So weird.
But like, I felt like everything in the production design and the costume design has this very odd, like, fake sheen to it.
I hated it.
To me, a lot of the costume design kind of makes me think of, and I don't mean this as an insult to it, but like amateur theater companies?
Yes.
That when it's like, this is actually clearly a woman's coat from like Belk's, but we're going to pretend that it's an 1850s coat.
Yeah,
that's how it feels.
And it's a lot of I'm sure it's not low quality, but it looks like the cheap bridal satin.
Yep.
On a lot of the costumes that just
I also could scream for days about the fact that Michelle Williams' hair is constantly down.
Oh my god.
Why is her hair down? And it's like, it's not even like, I'm fine when movies make the choice to do that, like, in a way that at least feels period accurate, even though it's not. Like, I think, Little Women has a lot of people with their hair down, like, even the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, like, people's hair is down more than it really should be sometimes, but like, at least they make it feel like it's not styled in a modern way, whereas
Fun fact, I know the hair department head for this movie.
Well, I have some questions for them.
Yeah, he was a hair department head for Wonder Woman 1984.
Oh, okay.
Facebook friends.
The sound design in this film is everything that I hate about the modern movie musical. I do not mean this as an insult to Disney Channel. A lot of modern movie musicals sound like Disney Channel musicals, which, if you're Disney Channel, that's fine.
We're all in this together.
Right. If you're this, your sound mixing should be better.
Well, hey, I mean, it is streaming on Disney Plus, so
the best thing about this film is the fact that it got Ramin Karimloo to do those covers of some of the songs from it. This whole film, I don't know, the whole thing feels very sloppy to me.
Okay, when that song came on, at first I didn't recognize it because I'm familiar with it as an actually well-sung song. And so I was really confused because I love Hugh Jackman. Like, I will say this, I love Hugh Jackman. I have a lot of questions for him about some choices he has made in his personal life and in terms of affiliation that he has with some people, the Kushners. And I just want to know why he sang so much in this, because I know that song can be done better than that.
It's a very weird thing, whereas I felt like Hugh Jackman belted too much in Les Mis. He sang too much in Greatest Showman, and I'm like, my man, why? I think, like I said, Zendaya's the best part of this film. The film would be significantly better if it was about Zendaya and Zac Efron's characters. That is a story I'm actually interested in. I have no interest in hearing about P.T. Barnum if we're not going to discuss what a terrible human he was.
Can we put Zac Efron into a better movie musical? Because like High School Musical is fine, but he is actually decently talented.
Please. Why is the dancing in this film so bad? Like,
oh God. I don't even want to get into that because I was like, what are you doing?
Right?
This filmed in New York. You have so many Broadway actors so close.
Yeah, and it's not even that like all of the dancers were bad. Like a lot of the choreography
they did their
was
best.
just bad. Like
it was the same consistently.
And this musical actually inspired for me a test that I have that I apply to other period films, which is I call it the Greatest Showman test, and it means are we needlessly applying the name of a historical figure to a character when the film would be better off if they were a fictional character? Like, the P.T. Barnum that we see in this film is not the real P.T. Barnum.
Who was that man?
The movie would not suffer in any way, shape, or form if it was about a fictional, character. Like
circus proprietor.
Right. You could call him George, and it would be the same movie. The same movie. Like, you could have said, like, inspired by whatever. But, and I apply this to a lot of movies where I'm like, that was fun, but you're lying to the public in a weird way.
Life is good, but it could be better.
Yes. Life, if I did never have to see this movie again.
This is good, but it could be better.
Except it's not good.
No.
So obviously,
life isn't good either.
There's that. So obviously, first, we're going to talk about P.T. Barnum. The thing about P.T. Barnum is that I have a degree in public relations. So I know way too much about P.T. Barnum because he essentially invented the publicity stunt. He is sort of held up in my PR classes as an example of the reason that PR has a bad rep. The like what not to be. Phineas Taylor Barnum. You understand why he went by PT whenever you learn that his first name was Phineas. Mm-hmm. He was born on July 5th in 1810 in Bethel, Connecticut. He was a showman. He was a politician, a businessman, a con man, an author, a publisher, and a philanthropist. The only thing at those that I would say he was the greatest is probably con man. He was 15 when his father died. I think the movie wants us to think he was younger. And he was left to help support his mom and siblings.
Never mentioned in the movie.
Right. He actually, at a very young age, was the head of a Connecticut newspaper. And he was arrested 3 times for libel.
Good
which
Lord.
Feels like a sign of where his life would go. In 1829, he did marry Charity Hallett, who was also from Bethel, Connecticut. I was able to find very little about her online. No idea really who she was, but he was 19 and she was 21. They went on to have 4 daughters, although one of them died at the age of 2. One of the other daughters was written out of his will because she committed adultery.
Wow.
So a really fun dad. This is also interesting.
And written out in the movie too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is fun. While we're talking about, his family, Charity died in 1873, and he took another wife the following year. He was 64 years old, and he married 24-year-old Nancy Fish, who was the daughter of one of his British friends.
Good
so
Lord.
There's this 40-year age gap, and hey,
no shame.
I'm not someone to judge an age gap in a relationship, unless it's 40 years, and it's your friend's daughter. That makes it even worse. That makes it so much worse. Yeah, and it's it's the 1870s. It's a time period where we're not really doing that anymore. But he does move to New York in 1834, and in 1835, he rents an elderly slave Now, New York laws at the time meant that you couldn't purchase a slave, but he got around it by renting this woman on a yearly basis. Her name was Joyce Heath, and he claimed that she was the 161-year-old former nursemaid of George Washington. He took her on tour around the Northeast. He earned as much, supposedly, as $1,500 a week. Mind you, he rented her for $1,000. And obviously, she wasn't 161 years old, and she was not the nursemaid of George Washington. When she dies, he charges admission for people to come to a live autopsy.
Oh my God.
Where they discover that she was in fact like 80 some years old. But yeah, so like he exploits her not only in life, but also in death. There's also some question he may have owned other slaves during his lifetime as well. But so in 1841, a few years later, he opens the Barnum American Museum, which he will run until 1868. It's originally full of wax figures and stuffed animals like we see in the movie, and he crams in a bunch of oddities, both living and not, fake and real. Some of these exhibits included the Fiji mermaid, which was actually a monkey head sewn onto a fishtail.
Lovely.
Delicious. Chang and Ing, which were Siamese twins that he, exhibited as a thing to come and gawk at. And Tom Thumb, or Charles Stratton, his actual name, who we do see in the film. Although in the film we're told that he's I think he says he's 22. He actually acquired Tom Thumb at the age of 4.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the bearded lady is another one who was a real person who was in his, sort of troupe. But he actually got her to start being exhibited when she was an infant. Not an adult. Other things included an African man-monkey hybrid called What Is It? Literally, they called this guy What Is It? It was actually just an African-American man that they said was part monkey. And also Aztec children. They were just from El Salvador, but he was like, ooh, look at the Aztec children. Supposedly his ideas on race changed later when he got involved with politics. With P.T. Barnum, you never really know what's real and what's fake, what he's saying just for the, spin of it. But maybe he actually came around on that. But certainly he was very exploitative of the people in his museum, if we are willing to call it that. And I think, it's interesting because in the movie it's kind of shown as this empowerment thing. There's, there's the song This Is Me, which, hey, Keila Settle does a great job with it.
Yes.
But, even in the film, I was like, no, this doesn't seem right to me. He's come pay money to look at these odd people.
Also, I thought that song was a really odd choice after he pushes them out of the room and is like, no, move along.
Yeah.
And then they're all like, we love you. And I was like, this is such weird propaganda.
Yep. He did in fact go on a tour of Europe and have an audience with Queen Victoria. It wasn't like it's shown in the film where it's like Queen Victoria wants you to come to England. He was already in Europe traveling with his show.
Yeah. Also, Queen Victoria was weirdly played in
that
this movie.
That entire sequence, I wanted to tear my hair out.
I have a toothache from gritting my teeth.
Yeah. In 1871, he starts Barnum's Grand Traveling Museum, Menagerie, Caravan, and Hippodrome. Because that's too much of a mouthful, he calls it the greatest show on earth. He started with partners. It wasn't until 1875 that he gains full ownership. But then, in 1881, he joins up with Bailey and Hutchinson, who are already circus proprietors, and they become Barnum and Bailey Circus. In 1882, the following year, they introduced Jumbo, the 11.5-foot tall elephant, who is very popular and is probably maybe the most well-known Barnum and Bailey act today. And the circus actually did run until 2017 in some form.
Did you ever go see it?
I did not. This is a little bit of a weird thing. Circuses kind of freak me out.
I went to the arena. Is it the arena? I don't know all the names of all the theaters in DC, but it's the
Yeah.
big one that they like have the concerts at.
Mm.
And I went when I was like 5 or 6 because that was like a big thing to do. Like the circus was in town. So this was like the 90s. I actually cannot remember for the life of me. I might have been younger. It was either when we lived in Maryland or when we moved here to Virginia. And I went and I like vaguely remember it. I was only there for the white tigers. That was like my whole thing. And I have a stuffed white tiger and I have a pink like plastic cup that's like an elephant that had like the snow cone, like red snow cone stuff in it. And it says like P.T. Barnum's Barnum and Bailey on the side of it. And that's like my only frame of reference for that. But then like I remember researching like the horrible things that happened to the animals.
Yep. That's
like shortly after seeing it. And I was like, how could you take me?
I like in my research on P.T. Barnum, I didn't even really get into the way that obviously there was a lot of animal cruelty and animal exploitation because like with the actual P.T.
The human exploitation.
Right, with the P.T. Barnum stuff, it's like first you gotta get through all the human exploitation before you can even get to that. Here's a very weird thing. He served as mayor of Bridgeport, Connecticut in 1875. He also served 2 terms in the Connecticut state legislature because at a certain point he decided he was going to be a politician. And like you were right, like you mentioned earlier, they show him in the movie drinking a lot. Like a lot. He was a member of the temperance movement. He supported having a prohibition a lot earlier than it actually happened. He was very outspoken against that. Whenever he was mayor of Bridgeport, like his whole things was he was gonna like take down drinking and prostitution.
Who can I bully about this? Do you remember when I bullied the director of Les Mis for having Enjolras drinking and like I legitimately flamed him on Twitter and they changed the entire choreography of the scene?
I just
can I retroactively like have it replaced with him like drinking, I don't know, coffee shots?
Yep. So his friends did say that he was very good-natured and kind, and like I think that that's
every con man is
exactly
kind and good-natured.
But also egotistical and ruthlessly frugal. He dies of a stroke on April 7th, 1891 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and supposedly his last words are asking about the profits from like the latest the last night's show, which is kind of hilarious. And like I said earlier, like The Greatest Showman sort of shows him as this like Harold Hill, likable con man figure, but the truth of it's a lot darker. Like I think a lot of people will know that P.T. Barnum was a bad man. He did a lot of bad things. I mean, everything from like he literally started out his career exploiting a slave, to animal cruelty, sort of the treatment of all these people. He's a very complicated man and
treating his family poorly.
I think that it's not that I think that he's a bad subject for a film, because I think that you could actually probably make a really interesting movie about P.T. Barnum. This ain't it, though.
No, I loved what we were talking about pre-show about like somebody like Ethan Hawke playing him.
I feel like inspired that I thought of that. Like
seriously, I can't unthink it. If anybody's seen Good Lord Bird, like you know how well Ethan Hawke does with historical characters that are a little bit crazy and kind of morally ambiguous.
There's a Tesla movie that came out last year, which is it's a horrible movie. Like I didn't like it at all, but he's very good in it.
Very good.
Yeah. So if anyone ever wants to make a P.T. Barnum film again, call Ethan Hawke up.
Hey, let's do it ourselves. Let's just like do this.
I don't think I can spend that much time with P.T. Barnum.
See, but that's the thing. You have to have somebody who dislikes him who will give it accuracy. I don't know. I have such a hard time. Like, I remember going to, like, I think the 2018 convention, and so many people were dressed up as P.T. Barnum. And I was just like, do you know who you are dressing up as? Like, a legitimate slave owner.
I also think the thing about it is that, obviously, like, P.T. Barnum did all these bad things, but also, like, circuses are very interesting. Mm-hmm.
They're fascinating. I love circuses. I love the concept.
I think the issue is that like circuses throughout history, coming down from P.T. Barnum, have largely been involved in large amounts of animal cruelty. And obviously, I'm not saying that all circuses do that. Like, and I think that ones
but it's
that
the
are
backbone
like, currently running do not. But for so long, that's what they were.
And I mean, the backbone is also cruelty to people as well because
Yeah.
of the things that they were coerced into doing to put on a good show, and highly unethical.
Yeah.
But the principle of circuses has always fascinated me since I was a small child. And I used to like jokingly write in my diary that I was going to run away from home and join a circus. I don't remember what TV show as a child like had that idea put into my brain, but it's something I thought of from a very early age. And I remember like, I don't know if you ever watched Are You Afraid of the Dark on Nick at Night.
Oh.
They had like some very terrifying circus episodes, and they like live with me in my head. And there's also an episode of Torchwood that had like this weird, freaky circus that came from out of the rain. Just circuses are so interesting, and they are prevalent throughout all sorts of media, all sorts of like television, books, movies, obviously musicals. And they've been around for a very long time. Circuses got their start, a very long time ago, very prevalent in England. And then they started being popular here in America before P.T. Barnum. He just latched onto a cool thing. So I started doing some research today, trying to see if there were any other prevalent circus proprietors that might be interesting to talk about. Despite the name permeance of Barnum and Bailey Circus, PT did not create the first circus in America. In fact, the very first circus started in 1800 and ran until about 1820, and that was the circus of, and I'm going to slaughter their names, the Circus of Pepin and Brechard, which toured extensively through the East Coast and of the U.S. and also all throughout Canada. So Victor Pepin was born in 1780. His father was a Canadian who had fought in the American Revolution, and Victor was born in Albany, New York. He also helped colonize Texas, which I thought was a really weird fact that was like on a factoid sheet, but I didn't find a lot of information about that, so I guess he had been in the military, presumably. And then Jean-Baptiste Casimir Brechard was his partner in the circus, and it was an equestrian circus. So the Circus of Pepin and Brechard is considered the first American circus and is even mentioned in the United States Congressional Record of 1810, which is insane. I also learned that they had 2 circus theaters built here in Virginia, which was cool. One was located in Richmond and one was located in Alexandria, but they had theaters that were constructed for their performances all across the East Coast and all of the major cities. Cities in North Carolina, cities in Pennsylvania, like Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York, they were everywhere. But I did find this one interesting fact that I thought was very timely. So the theater that they built in rural Pittsburgh, this was like, it was considered like a very small town on the other side of a mountain, and it was like Appalachia. This is not the Pittsburgh Steel City that we think of today, but it was very rural, and they had an up-and-coming architect design their theater, and that architect was Benjamin Latrobe, who would later go on to be the architect of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh, a timely fact. I studied architecture in college, and so I was like, oh, Latrobe, because he also did a design here in Virginia in Fredericksburg, which I was like, oh, nice connection. But they also later added a third partner to their circus, whose name was Caetano Maratini. I'm so sorry. But he was an immigrant from Cuba, and then he later kind of haired off and started his own thing in New Orleans. His was more of a minstrel show, I believe, which of course has a whole other deep history that I could spend an hour and a half talking about. So there is some conflicting information about who had the first big top. If you watch The Greatest Showman, they made a big deal when he was like, I don't need a building. I can just get a big top down by the docks. So it was either Pepin, who had the first big top in New York City, or Joshua Purdy Brown. So Brown had an itinerant show of exotic animals and also a minstrel performance in 1825, and that is hailed as the first circus proprietor to use a canvas tent to house his performance because he didn't want to have to pay for the rent of a building. Both of these circuses ran in New York City. Both of them had big tops that were canvas big tops. This was like a good 10, 15 years before P.T. Barnum was starting his shisty business. In 1835, a group of 135 farmers united to form the Zoological Institute, founding the country's first circus industry. P.T. Barnum doesn't come onto the scene until 1841 with his purchase of the rundown and mostly abandoned Scudder's American Museum in New York City. So again, why are we talking about P.T. Barnum when there's like so much other interesting earlier history that we could have latched onto and have talked about these other circus proprietors? It just doesn't make sense to me. Like,
yeah.
and also, you could also easily take all of this information, the first big top proprietor, these people who are from other places coming together and doing all of this, like, you know, farmers uniting and all of this different stuff would have made such an interesting fictionalized version of the circus story that would have been a nice feel-good, fun hour and a half of my life.
Absolutely. And then they could have given you like a nice family feel-good movie because you wouldn't have been working with as much of the baggage as you do whenever you're making a movie about a specific person.
Yeah.
Like, in general, I think a lot of the time, if you want to make a feel-good film, you should just probably not attach a historical figure to it.
Never. Real people are disappointments.
Except for my girl, Jenny Lind.
They did her dirty.
They did her so dirty. That, honestly, the treatment of Jenny Lind in this film is the main reason that I hated it on my first watch, which, this was the second time I had seen it. I don't think I said this earlier. The first time I watched it was on an airplane because I knew that I didn't want to pay money to go see it at the cinema. But it was back whenever I was living in London that this came out, and I did a lot of flying back and forth across the Atlantic where you get, you know, all the recent movies to watch. And I got off so angry about the treatment of Jenny Lind in this. So Johanna Maria Lind was a Swedish opera singer. She was called the Swedish Nightingale. Her English accent in the film baffles me.
I don't understand it.
And it's not that I'm saying that she needed to have a Swedish accent. I just think her having a different accent, but not the right different accent, is such a weird choice. She was born on October 6, 1820, in Stockholm. She's said to be one of the best singers of the 19th century. She was admired for her vocal control, her vocal agility, the naturalness with which she sang. Also, I'd like to highlight again, she was an opera singer, since this film didn't know that. She did operas in Sweden and across Europe, but she actually retired from opera at the age of 29. And she did, in fact, go to America in 1850 after being invited by P.T. Barnum. He wanted to sort of legitimize himself as a sort of entertainment, I guess, vendor, if you will.
So he used a woman.
Yeah, so he was like, I know what I'll do. I'll get a really talented woman. Instead of just showing off these, like, freaks, which is, like, his word, not mine. She did 93 large concerts for him, and then afterwards, she did break off from him, because she, like, there were some disagreements about, like, the management of the concerts, and she continued touring under her own management. She owned a very sizable amount of money, which she donated to charity. She largely used it to fund free schools in Sweden. And unlike in the film, there was definitely there's no record at all of any sort of romantic attachment between her and P.T. Barnum in any way, shape, or form. She actually married her pianist, Otto Goldschmidt, in 1852 while they were touring. Later that year in 1852, she returns to Europe with her new husband. She goes on to have 3 children. She gives the occasional concert. And she actually becomes a professor of singing at the Royal College of Music in London. But she largely retires from, public life. She died on November 2nd, 1887 in England. And essentially, to compare to the movie, they invent this whole idea of a romantic attachment between her and P.T. Barnum. She sang opera. And certainly, I get that they wanted her song to match the style of the rest of the music, but I also question, again, why they needed to bring her in as a character.
That was so weird.
She was Swedish, not English. That's also very confusing because I feel like the film doesn't exactly make that clear. There's just a lot. And like, no shade against Rebecca Ferguson because I do like her as an actress. But I have no idea what exactly they thought they were doing with this character.
And like, to be honest, the only reason she existed was to create conflict between PT and Charity.
Which is dumb if you think about the fact that, like, maybe Charity could just be annoyed that he's
wasting all this time at the circus.
Right, becoming like ruthlessly obsessed with money, egotistical.
It was so ham-fisted.
Maybe she could be annoyed that he thinks that he's better than the people in his circus. Like, because she
so many other roots.
They build her up as to be like this very humble person who like never wanted all of this fame and wealth. I also just have to say, and then, this is not about Jenny Lin, but I forgot to say it earlier. The whole thing about his daughters going to ballet classes
was so weird.
So weird. And like, I did not research this, but I am fairly certain that is not a thing that girls were doing at that time.
Also, can we talk about his one daughter being the tree? And I was like, what is the point of this?
I just, like, ballet at that time. Like, this is pre-Civil War in the US. This is,
Yeah, I don't think that was the thing. Like, I did not research it, but I feel confident in saying no.
That respectable little girls did. That, you know what I mean? Like, it was
also that they would rent out the entire big theater in New York for little girls to.
Like, that's just not. If you wanted to just make a modern movie, just make a modern movie, please. Yeah, it's one of those films where it's so historically inaccurate that it's like kind of hard to even know where to start.
That was me in the costumes.
Oh God, the costumes.
Oh God. So I don't want to sound like an uber, like, I'm trying not to curse, but like an uber bee. But fun fact, the costumer for The Greatest Showman is also the costume designer for Bridgerton.
And I think the costumes in Bridgerton are lovely. Obviously,
I love them.
They take some liberties with like fabrics and stuff, but the silhouettes are so right.
So perfect. And so I was actually tremendously shocked when I saw that it was Alan Mierjenik. I don't feel like that's how you say her last name, but I tried. Maruzhnik? Yeah, as soon as I said it, I was like, I think that's Maruzhnik.
Maybe.
Yeah. I was actually disappointed when I saw that it was her, and she's like a very famous costumer who has been costuming since the late 70s, and she's worked on super incredible movies, and she also worked on Behind the Candelabra in 2013, which starred Matt Damon, but she's really talented. Like how I just slid Matt Damon in there.
I am stewing in it.
That movie is actually really wild. It also has Scott Bakula, and it's just like an absolute weird movie, and I don't think anyone ever talks about it. But anyways, she's a really talented costume designer. And so when I saw that that was who designed these costumes, I was like, oh. But she was tasked with creating more than 500 colorful, unique, dazzling costumes in this film, and that's not including the thousands of extras that were also dressed by her. And her team of costumers, of course. She did succeed in making an extremely colorful, unique, and dazzling experience while completely abandoning historical accuracy along the way. The colors were wrong, the fabrics were wrong, the styles were wrong. Some of them, like Jenny's dress, was just downright hideous. And I do not understand why you would put a beautiful young woman like Zendaya and that hideous green dress, which was so anachronistic that it literally that was one of the moments I stopped and I was like, what are we doing here? What are we trying to do?
I understand. Like, I mean, you've heard on the show, like, for our listeners, I'm not a huge stickler whenever it comes to, like, accuracy in costumes. I think that, like, you should, do your best. But, like, I totally get, like, I love something like Mary Queen of Scots that, like, kind of adheres to it, but takes liberties that are...
The denim, I loved it.
Right,
it was so
or, like,
clever.
Little Women where it's, like, they wanted to, you know, give the idea of the historical period, but also do a lot of like character-based costuming. But I'm not getting any character building from these costumes. They're
No.
also not accurate. They also don't look cohesive. Like it looks like there's so many different time periods, and then some of it just looks straight up modern. And like a lot of them, like you said, they're just not pretty.
Not good. So that green dress that Anne wears, all I could think of was, this is going to sound terrible, but it reminded me of the dress. I'm blanking on the character name, but she wears it in Hades Town. And that green dress with the black lace, that is actually gorgeous.
Yep.
It's gorgeous in Hades Town. But it reminded me of that dress if somebody showed up to a convention and like wasn't a good sewer. Like, I'm not a good sewer, so like if I try to make that costume and then rolled up to a convention, it looked like that dress.
Yep.
But not done well. And I feel terrible saying this. I hate giving critiques. I always try to find something good. But like, even his coat is wrong. Even P.T. Barnum's coat is wrong. That is not what he wore. That the fabric was wrong. There was just so many things that was like, if you want to go high fantasy, just go. Just run with it. Just embrace the, like you said earlier, the community theater style costumes, and just embrace it. Just embrace it and run with it. And don't try for historical accuracy, because it's really jarring to see like PT's normal people clothing and then like everybody else is like super fantastical, completely anachronistic. Like I was just not impressed, and I was really disappointed because so many people have talked about the show being such a gorgeous show and like, oh, the costumes are so beautiful. And I just I had so many issues with it. And it was so much of my issue was that it was like these costumes are almost good. They're almost right. They're almost like you could almost make something work with this. But then when you have everybody all dancing and all in a scene together and you see so many things clashing, like certain costumes would work on their own, but when you put them all together, it makes for like too much.
Yep.
I will say I did like the costumes on the albino dancers.
Mm-hmm.
I actually researched them because I was like, I wonder if they're actually albino, because I kind of remember there was some controversy about the whole bearded woman thing and stuff. Like I distantly remembered that when this movie came out, there was some backlash from that. And I was like, oh, I wonder if some of the other people that were representing these communities are actually that. And they are actually albino dancers from Sweden, I believe. And I really liked what they did with their hair, and like the white costuming I thought was like really beautiful. And it was a twins. But yeah, I have not much positive to say. And I'm still fixating on the ring. Literally, it's the first 5 seconds of the movie. He puts his hand down on his little staff thing, and I saw a golden wedding band, and I was like, I thought this movie was set in 1850. And that was all I thought about for the rest of the movie. Seriously, I was like, no, men did not start wearing wedding bands until like World War I, World War II. And they were surely not big, thick gold wedding bands. And at first I thought, oh my God, maybe Hugh accidentally like left his wedding ring on.
Right.
Like, he's married. Maybe he like left it on and like filmed this and they just never caught it. And then like later on he's wearing it. And I was like, oh, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. And I was disappointed.
Oh man. Well, obviously, as you can tell, neither Mackie nor I like this movie.
I'm so sorry.
For our next episode, we promise we're gonna do a film that we actually like.
It'll feature a different ghost and not P.T. Barnum's ghost running a PR scandal.
Yeah, exactly.
Scheme. Well, yeah. So the irony of him being like this PR mastermind, and even in the afterlife, he's got his minions out here trying to make him look like a good guy.
Like, who knew that the ghost of P.T. Barnum like controlled Hugh Jackman?
I swear, I'm going to wake up tonight and the ghost of P.T. Barnum is just going to be standing in the corner of my room and being like, you know what you did.
Well, thank you to our listeners for listening to our 17th episode of Petticoats and Poppies, History Girls at Movies. We know it was a roast. And if you like The Greatest Showman, I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
I would love to know why.
Seriously, I feel so bad, but seriously, we would love to hear from you on social media and to hear what you think of The Greatest Showman. Is it great? Is it not so great? Did you love it because of something that was going on in your life and it just kind of hit at the right moment? Because I've got films like that. Let us know. I would love to hear your side of the story.
You can find us on social media at HGATM Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find Maggie at Maggie of the Town, and you can find me at Nicole Ackman 16.
You can listen to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Earglue Media website, and on Audible. If you like what you hear, don't forget to leave us a rating over on Apple Podcast and on Podchaser. Every other episode, we'll be reading our reviews, so be sure to leave us one if you would like to be featured.
We'll be back soon with another episode about a movie musical period drama as we continue to look at period films from a history and film perspective. Until then, stay safe and healthy and wear a mask.
You've been listening to Petticoats and Poppies.
History Girls at the Movies. Stars, Hugh Jackman.
Uber B.